simultaneously so the guilty had no time to run, destroy evidence, or spin lies. For 6 weeks, they worked in secret, each day heavier with risk. Yet every night Rebecca felt Margaret's presence in the mansion's quiet halls, a reminder that courage didn't require certainty, only commitment. The arrests began at dawn on a cold Saturday morning. Rebecca watched from her living room, Emma curled beside her, the television casting a bluish glow across their faces. Edward Whitmore, the ringleader, was dragged from his sprawling estate, red-faced and roaring. Constance Whitmore was arrested at the country club, disbelief etched across her perfect features. Gerald Patterson was pulled from a board meeting mid-sentence. Daniel Chen, the lawyer who had laundered millions, was taken from his office downtown. By noon, 12 were in custody. By nightfall, 19. And as the FBI executed their operation, Sarah Mitchell's article detonated across the nation. Decades of corruption, how Sterling Heights elite stole millions while one woman fought alone. Within an hour, the story went viral, shattering reputations and toppling political shields. When the trial began, the defense tried to smear Rebecca, painting her as unstable, greedy, manipulative, but she held steady. She told the truth, calmly, fearlessly, and the jury listened. Guilty verdicts echoed through the courtroom like thunder. 35 years, 28, 15, justice long delayed had arrived. Yet victory didn't erase the aftermath. The legal battle over the bearer bonds stretched for months, but in the end, the court ruled they belonged to the public. They were stolen taxpayer funds that had to be returned. Rebecca didn't argue. Wealth had never been her goal. What she wanted, what Margaret had wanted, was safety, accountability, and truth. Slowly, the mansion changed. The halls warmed. The gardens bloomed again under the care of steady hands. Emma thrived, her laughter filling rooms that once echoed with silence. She told her class she wanted to be a lawyer one day so she could help people the way her mother did. Rebecca stepped fully into her role as director of the foundation built in Margaret's name, offering protection, support, and resources to whistleblowers across the country. She spoke at events, organized grants, and used the mansion not as a symbol of wealth, but as a fortress of integrity. Her fear no longer ruled her decisions. Her purpose did. One quiet evening, 2 years after the trial ended, Rebecca and Emma walked through the garden where white roses swayed in the twilight breeze. Emma looked up and asked whether Miss Margaret knew what they had done, whether she knew the truth had finally won. Rebecca smiled softly, believing she did. The mansion felt different now, no longer heavy with secrets but glowing with legacy. Rebecca often paused at the attic door, remembering the woman who had spent years alone, documenting corruption with nothing but faith that someone would one day finish her work. And she realized something powerful. Courage wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Sometimes it was a tired, single mother choosing to stand her ground instead of running. Sometimes it was an old woman writing quietly in a journal while the world pretended not to see her. And together their courage had changed an entire county. Sometime in the golden hush of a new chapter, Rebecca stood at the top of the mansion's staircase, looking down at the warm lights glowing across the floors that had once terrified her. Now they felt like home. She thought of Margaret, of the secrets she protected, the battles she fought, the legacy she entrusted to a stranger who refused to quit. Rebecca understood now that the real inheritance wasn't the mansion. It was the mission. The courage to choose truth over silence, integrity over comfort, justice over fear. And she had carried that mission to the end. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, Make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more cinematic stories that honor real courage. And before you go, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are right now? Sometime in the bruised blue stillness before dawn, Rebecca Palmer sat in her rain-soaked Honda Civic with her hands wrapped tight around the steering wheel, staring at the blinking voicemail on her cracked phone. She was 32, exhausted, stretched thin by 2 jobs and a life that seemed to take far more than it ever gave. But the message waiting for her didn't belong in her world. It spoke of an inheritance, a mansion valued at $7 million, left to her by a distant relative she couldn't even picture. The next afternoon, still disbelieving, she walked through the echoing corridors of a marble-floored law office, Target jeans and diner-worn shoes contrasting sharply with the mahogany walls and polished brass. The attorney slid a photograph of Margaret Ashford across the desk, white hair pearls, eyes sharp with an intelligence that could cut. And then he said the strangest thing. Margaret had been watching you. Watching her struggles, her survival, the way she held her life together with grit instead of privilege. Hours later, standing on the steps of the sprawling mansion with Emma's small hand slipping into hers, Rebecca understood instinctively that this place wasn't a gift or a reward. It was a mystery, a responsibility. The house felt alive, humming with secrets buried deep in its bones, whispering a truth that waited patiently for someone brave enough to open the right door. That door was in the attic, a narrow stairway, a plain wooden frame, a dust-softened room filled with decades of journals written in Margaret Ashford's exact, disciplined handwriting. Night after night, long after Emma had fallen asleep, Rebecca read. And what she discovered turned awe into dread. Sterling Heights, the pristine, wealthy neighborhood idolized by the county, had been built on corruption. For 40 years, developers manipulated land deals, stole taxpayer money, intimidated officials, and buried evidence beneath layers of fraud. Margaret had documented everything. She fought alone, surrounded by enemies with political influence and limitless resources. But she hadn't just recorded the truth. She'd protected it. Against the attic wall sat a heavy steel safe. Rebecca tried cracking it with every combination she could imagine, frustration building until Margaret's journal gave her the answer. Not logic, but memory. The day Margaret bought the house, November 3, 1958. The dial clicked, the safe groaned open, and Rebecca's breath locked in her chest. Inside lay stacks of bearer bonds worth $260 million, proof of decades of stolen funds and crimes that powerful people had killed to conceal. In that moment, Rebecca understood. Margaret hadn't chosen an heir. She had chosen a successor, and the truth now rested in Rebecca's trembling hands. The retaliation came swiftly. Cars lingered outside the property. Calls rang with silence on the other end. Her bank account was flagged without explanation, frozen so she couldn't buy groceries. Code enforcement officers materialized with absurd violations. The Homeowners Association, an organization worshiping appearances, filed a lawsuit claiming her presence disrupted community standard. It was a warning wrapped in paperwork, but warnings grew into threats. One night, a window shattered in Emma's room. No accident, no mistake. Rebecca's fear surged like fire through her veins, but beneath it rose something stronger, defiance. She returned to the attic, to Margaret's journals, reading past dawn with a determination she'd never felt before. Margaret had fought alone because she had no choice. Rebecca did. And though she had been overlooked, underestimated, and pushed aside her entire life, she had never once backed down from doing what was necessary. She wasn't wealthy, powerful, or connected, but she was stubborn, and stubbornness was its own kind of armor. Help arrived where she least expected it. Cole, a retired police officer with weathered hands and a loyalty Margaret had earned decades ago, appeared first, quiet, steady, ready to protect Rebecca and Emma without being asked. Then came Agent Chen, the FBI investigator who had spent years trying to crack the Sterling Heights corruption but had always been blocked by disappearing evidence and intimidated witnesses. Together they pieced through Margaret's files, uncovering how deep the rot truly went. But even the FBI could be stalled. So Rebecca sought the one force corruption feared more than law enforcement: exposure. She contacted Sarah Mitchell, an investigative journalist whose career had been built on tearing down powerful men who believed themselves untouchable. In a small cafe outside the city, Rebecca slid copies of Margaret's documentation across the table. Sarah's eyes widened. She instantly recognized it as the missing thread she'd spent 15 years chasing. And with that, a dangerous alliance formed. They built a plan that required precision, an explosive article and a coordinated sweep of arrests happening